Jumping into the number 5 spot of the top 5 best 4K gaming monitors of 2024 is the Gigabyte M27U, coming in at a price tag of $399.99. If you guys want to check out any of the 5 gaming monitors in this video, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links. But let's talk about the M27U. Now, at the time of filming, yes, it is $399.99, a very good price. It does kind of fluctuate a little bit. Sometimes it's in the $400 and above $500, and at that price point, it's not worth it. Now, for that price, you get a 27-inch screen size with a 160Hz refresh rate, and you get FreeSync Premium Pro, which allows for a variable refresh rate and HDR to be on at the same time, which is something pretty nice to have at this price point. Also keep in mind, this is kind of like best by price category. So this isn't the best 4K monitor out there, but this is a really good value for the price and definitely one you should consider. All right, for the panel type, this is an IPS panel. Now, while it does have a local dimming feature, it's only got like 16 zones and it's pretty horrible. So always leave that off. But what about ghosting and gameplay? Well, the ghosting here is really, really good. Just about as good as you're going to get with an IPS panel. It's borderline crystal clear, if not crystal clear for an IPS panel. Obviously, if you fluctuate a lot with the refresh rate, that's where something like an OLED is going to have the advantage, as it's going to have the lowest ghosting at all frame rates, whereas an IPS panel is going to have the best ghosting at, well, 160 Hz or above 100. However, if you are able to push over 100 frames, this is really, really low ghosting. Gaming on this panel is very enjoyable, especially because of that 4K resolution and good colors. Not vibrant like an OLED, but still very, very pretty. But with that, let's talk brightness. This was tested at about 415 nits, and that's a good brightness, but how is HDR? And it's pretty much exactly like you'd expect. It gets a little bit brighter overall, but it's mainly an SDR focused monitor, and so that's likely what you're gonna be using this 95% of the time in, not HDR. Colors here are still impressive, even at this price point, covering 95% of the DCI-P3 color gamut. And if you wanted to use this for your console, it's in a price point where that really makes sense for the Series X and PS5, and it's great for it. It's fully compatible at 4K, 120 Hz with variable refresh rate and HDR on for both the PS5, Series S, and Series X. But with that, let's move on to the number 4 spot, and this is the Acer Predator XB273K V3. This comes in at, again, $399.99, and it's basically the same monitor as the M27U. However, in some countries, the Gigabyte's available, and then in some countries, the Acer's available. In the United States, we have both, but I think in a lot of European countries, you can only get the Gigabyte, and in like Canada and Mexico, I think you can get the Acer Predator, but not the Gigabyte. One more note is that as we continue on with the monitors, they're gonna get more expensive and more better because of that. So if you want something super, super premium, skip to the number 3, 2, or 1 spot. Okay, but for the same price tag, you also get a 27-inch panel size. You're also getting 160 Hz and FreeSync Premium that works well with the G-Sync. And another note here is that while it's not called FreeSync Premium Pro, it is FreeSync Premium Pro. You're able to have variable refresh rate and HDR on at the same time with the XB273K V3. The panel type also follows suit here, being an IPS panel. Ghosting here is also extremely low. Not quite crystal clear, but just dang close. And not enough of a difference between the Gigabyte that it makes really any difference at all. The gaming experience on this is immense for the amount of money that you pay. Games are beautiful, visually crystal clear as it's 4K at this 27-inch screen size, which means, like the Gigabyte, no pixelation that's visible because this is about 163 ppi or 163 pixels per inch. That basically means even with small text, you're not really gonna have any visible pixelation. While I personally very much prefer a 240 Hz panel, you can't help but feel that luxurious gaming experience at this 4K 160 Hz that really way outclasses its price point. The value here is immense, both with the Acer and the Gigabyte. However, let's talk about brightness, HDR, and colors, because that's where I think the Acer kind of excels a little bit over the Gigabyte. So if you have the choice between the two, the Acer is the better option. This again tested at about 415 nits of brightness in SDR, and while this is an HDR capable monitor, the experience is subpar just like the Gigabyte. This is really centered around SDR and it does that very well. The colors look great out of the box and they're incredibly accurate out of the box. My panel was factory calibrated, and it was factory calibrated very well. Not only was the white balance bang on, so skin tones in movies and games is pretty much perfect, but it was so color accurate out of the box that you could legitimately do photo and video editing, and because this has a 95% coverage of the DCI-P3 color gamut, that's something that you can legitimately do, and that's impressive. The Gigabyte wasn't quite as good as the Acer, so that's why I think the Acer is better. Like the Gigabyte, this is fully compatible with the PS5, Series S, and Series X at 4K 120Hz and variable refresh rate and HDR on at the same time. Overall, if you want the best value 4K gaming monitor that you're mainly going to be using in SDR, this is hands down the best pick. But if you've got a little bit more money, let's move on to the number 3 spot. And this is the LG 32GR93U, coming in at a price point of $521.02. At the time of filming. This gives you a 32-inch screen size and obviously a 4K resolution, but that makes it the best screen size to resolution to take full advantage of all of those pixels. At 27 inches, 4K is awesome and great, and it's super crystal clear, but there's so many pixels in that smaller screen size that you're not really using all of them, if that makes sense. It's so crystal clear, but so is 32 at 4K, so that's where it's like the perfect combination. This hits 144 Hz and has FreeSync Premium, but is also NVIDIA certified G-Sync compatible, and as we expect, it works flawlessly. For the panel type, this is still just in IPS, and this is probably the most expensive just IPS or SDR centered monitor that I would recommend. I've tested pretty much all of them in this space, and the LG is the best one. It's also the best value. Ghosting here is extremely minimal, pretty much as good as you're going to get on any IPS. For SDR gameplay, this monitor is awesome. Colors look great. The overall panel is nice and vibrant, and while this does lack deep blacks, as this isn't mini LED lit or an OLED, for SDR gaming, this is pretty much as good as you're going to get, or as good as you should get, with the money that you spend. You can probably double the price on just an SDR focused monitor, but it's not really gonna get that much better than this panel. Now, after testing, this hit 450 nits in SDR, and while HDR lacks any sort of local dimming to get those deep blacks, HDR does slightly increase the overall screen brightness and take advantage of the wider color gamut. So it's actually something that I enjoyed using every now and then. For colors, this covers 95% of the DCI-P3 color gamut, and the HDR mode is actually tuned well. It's actually quite usable. Not just that, but this monitor comes factory calibrated, so you can legitimately use this for some photo and video editing. Pair that with a 32-inch screen size and obviously the 4K resolution, and yeah, this is a great panel to live with every day for both working and some pretty sweet gaming. For console compatibility, it's fully compatible, 4K, 120, variable refresh rate, HDR, PS5, Xbox Series S and X, so yeah, it's great for that as well. Workstation, PC gaming, and console, yeah, this is a dang good monitor to do it. Plus, it's an IPS panel, so you could literally keep it 15 years without any burn-in or really risk of anything. Overall, if you want an awesome SDR gaming experience with a 32-inch screen size, the sweet 4K resolution, solid brightness and colors that can even do some photo and video editing, well, this is the best tested one compared to all the competition. But let's say you want something, well, with maybe some deep blacks. That brings us into the number 2 spot. This is the Samsung Odyssey Neo G8. Coming in at an MSRP of I think around $1,500, but that's not what these sell for anymore. Currently at the time of filming, it is under $800. They're pretty normally in the under $900, mid $800 range, but currently at the time of filming, I think it's something like $780, which is an insane price for this monitor, which is a pretty awesome time that we're in, that you can get a Neo G8 for that price. This panel is special. This comes in at a 32-inch screen size with a 1000R curve, so if you want that immersive curve, this one has it. This hits a 240 Hz refresh rate, and as expected, this is mainly an HDR-centered monitor with a true HDR experience to back up that HDR 1000 rating. It is truly magical. But as expected, this has FreeSync Premium Pro, which allows for variable refresh rate and HDR to be on at the same time, and that's what you're gonna wanna do like 95% of the time. For the panel type, this is a VA-based panel, but it is a mini LED lit VA panel with a whole frickin' lot of local dimming zones, and I mean a lot. Now, I know what you're thinking, a VA panel at this price point, especially its MSRP, and typically, yes, I would agree with that. I'm much more IPS over VA in most cases, but this VA panel is probably the best VA panel I have ever used. But let's talk ghosting, because we all know the history with VA panels and ghosting. And while this isn't gonna be quite as good as an IPS or an OLED, obviously, for a VA panel, this is the single best tuned VA panel I have ever used. While this doesn't have any ghosting, they tuned it to have a small amount of inverse ghosting or pixel overshoot. That being said, in-game, the image quality most of the time is exceptional still. As a reviewer, I could happily daily this as my main gaming monitor. This This really enters into a unique category of monitors that become jaw-droppingly gorgeous and super deep blacks. Because when doing a mini LED lit IPS panel is one thing, doing a mini LED lit VA panel, well, that makes it much more close to a OLED in terms of its black levels. It's really beautiful. The other benefit here is that this is gonna be a little bit brighter than like your OLED competition because it's mini LED lit. So the typical brightness is around the 350 nit range, which might not sound like a lot, but again, remember, you're gonna be using this in HDR 95% of the time, and those highlights here are gonna go over 1,000 nits. So the dynamics of the image is so freaking lifelike. It is absolutely stunning. And honestly, the overall experience isn't that different from an OLED. In some ways, it's actually better than like some of the QD OLEDs, although overall, I still do prefer the QD OLEDs from Samsung, but this is dang good. Now, console compatibility is fully compatible. 4K, 120, variable refresh rate, HDR, pretty much exactly what you would expect. Now, overall, this used to be in the $1,400 to $1,500 price range, and now you can get it sometimes under 800 bucks. That is a really awesome monitor for under 800 bucks. But with that, let's move on to the #1 best 4K gaming monitor of 2024. You guys probably already know what it is. This is the Alienware AW3225QF, coming in at a price tag of $1,199.99. And while that might sound like a lot of money, it's actually very affordable for what Alienware and Samsung, because the panel is made by Samsung, it's actually really affordable for what they give you. This is a 32-inch screen size with a slight curve. This hits 240 Hz and is certified G-Sync compatible and works flawlessly. The panel type here is the 3rd gen QD OLED from Samsung, which is the best OLED technology currently out in gaming monitors. The ghosting here is the lowest you're going to get. Essentially instantaneous pixel response, making for crystal clear gaming at all frame rates, not just on the upper end. Even if you're only doing 30 frames per second in Cyberpunk, you're gonna get crystal clear ghosting, which is, well, very impressive. Gaming on the Alienware AW3225QF is my single favorite out of all of the monitors that I have ever used. It is not only super smooth with that 240 Hz, it has the resolution and the clarity that only enhances even more with that glossy finish. Unlike matte finishes, if you don't know, matte finishes create this dirty screen effect. It's like if you wipe oil all over your phone. And why a lot of times high-end phones like iPhone 15 Pro Maxes and S24 Ultras, why those screens look so amazing, but then your monitor looks like crap, and usually because a phone is a glossy finish, and well, a lot of monitors are matte finishes. The glossy finish adds to clarity, increases the contrast ratio, making for even deeper blacks. Even things like text is so much clearer on a glossy finish. So if you've never actually used a glossy panel and you're getting this panel, you are in for a treat, because it's like having smudged glasses for most of your life and then putting on contacts, and it's like you're opening up another world. The colors pop out of the panel in this luscious vibrancy. This panel is truly god tier. And I'm really hard on OLEDs because of the potential for burn-in, and this is still my favorite monitor. Now, brightness here is the best currently among all the OLED gaming monitors, and like the Neo G8, the real life experience is significantly different from what the knitted figure is actually going to kind of tell you, which is kind of wrong. 90% of the time I'm using this in HDR, which allows for the highlights to hit a whopping 1,000 nits, and the beauty of this panel in HDR is truly the most dynamic image I have ever seen on a monitor. Now, one thing to note here is the HDR tuning is really good. It allows for a lot of control in HDR, and because of that, most of the time when using this, I was using this in HDR, literally 98% of the time. That includes desktop usage. I've actually been dailying this panel for the last 4 or 5 months now. Colors here are exactly as you would expect. They are jaw-droppingly beautiful, and the color gamut backs this up, covering a whopping 99% of the DCI-P3 color gamut. This can legitimately be an insanely good gaming monitor at night, and then a full-fledged professional photo and video editing machine during the day. Truly a no compromise monitor. This is then backed up having full console compatibility with 4K, 120, variable refresh rate, and HDR all at the same time for the PS5, Xbox Series X and S. But again, if you want to check out any of the 5 gaming monitors in this video, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links. If you get any of the monitors on the list, you cannot go wrong. But if you want the best of the best, the Alienware is amazing. I thought maybe when I started reviewing it after some time I was gonna be like, maybe it's not worth the potential risk of burn-in. You know, the price is still high, even though it's a great value, it's still high. Yeah, no, every single day I'm like, yeah, this monitor is so worth the price tag if you have the money. It's impressive. All right, this is a consumer tech review, and I'll see you guys in the next video.